Hello and welcome to Jessie James Beads. My name is Jem and today I want to show you how to make a double wrapped loop connector, but there's a little bit extra. So here is my how-to for a fancy beaded connector using Jessie James Beads. So I have an example here of what we're going to make together. It uses a single piece of wire. Absolutely usable by beginners and can be integrated into your rosary linked chain or your chain made with double wrapped loop connectors. This is just a little bit extra. So let's pop that one down and talk about the wire. I, as ever, am using raw copper round wire in 18 gauge. We're going to give that a little bit of a warm through to begin with. Now, in a slightly different way to how we would normally work, what I'm going to do is put a right angle bend 1 inch from the end. This is about 6 inches or so in total. You can use scraps of wire if you've got some slightly longer scraps. So the first thing I'm going to do is to make the wrapped loop complete at one end. So as I mentioned before, I tend to teach the two-step technique for making wrapped loops. Make the half shape first and then bring the tail around. Just gives you slightly more control. When you have much more practice in your wrapped loops, you can certainly speed that up. So once I'm happy that the round shape is centralised on the core wire, I'm going to take that tail all the way around and just give that a little bit of a tighten up. Now when you're working with short pieces of wire like this, it can be a bit uncomfortable on the fingertips. So I'm going to show you now a 2-plier technique for making a perfect wrapped loop. We're just going to use the second set of chain nose pliers to draw that tail all the way around. So I'm making very small movements with my pliers in my dominant hand, just opening and closing them as I go to make sure that that end is nice and smooth and flush to the core. You can rotate that ever so gently as well, just to give a smooth finish. So I've got one wrapped loop at the end. I'm going to add in my Jessie James bead now in a super fun boho design. Looks like a blue raspberry, which sounds like it ought to be fun. So I've got my first wrapped loop and I've set my bead. So let's get that second wrapped loop into position. Again, estimating the distance between the end of the bead and the beginning of your loop. Making that loop as we go. You can slow that down or speed it up, whatever your skill level or however you feel today. Get that nice and centralised on the end of that core wire. Get the wire wrapped around twice so that it matches at the other end. I think we might go for another half turn there. That looks pretty centralised and almost symmetrical. What I need to do now is warm through this slightly longer tail of wire than we're used to working with. I'm going to flip the design over and you can see that my wire is coming over the top of the core as we're looking at it. So I'm going to drag that all the way around. Lovely warmth into the wire as we go, and then use that bead to create a lovely smiling shape around that bead. Grip everything together, draw the tail around 1.5 times, like so, and then again we're going to add some extra warmth to that remaining tail of wire. Draw it back to the beginning point and then finish off by wrapping around the wrapped loop where we started. So once and 1.5 and 2 times. We've got a little tiny tail that we need to cut away. What I'm going to do is cut that so that the finished end sits midpoint inside the loop. Just gives a nice finish and feel to it, and then just squish that down so that the very tail is pushed flush with the loop. And there you have a double wrapped connector. Can be used in your rosary linking chain if you wish. I'm just going to take a second to straighten that end up. You can tighten the coils if you need to. Didn't take very long at all over this one, but you can take a little bit more time. But it's a really lovely way to up the aspect of certain beads, especially if you're making a lovely bead chain as well. You could have some simply rosary linked or double wrapped loop connectors, and then you could have a couple which have this halo effect going around the outside. Well, I hope that you love those, and I'll see you again very, very soon. This is Jem for Jessie James Beads.